Here's what sellers never find out until it's too late. The strategy that your agent is using to sell your home, most of it is invisible to you. You see the listing go up, you see the showings on the calendar, and then you wait and hope for the best. But behind the scenes, there's a whole set of moves that top agents make, most agents don't, that can mean the difference between a stale listing and an actual sold sign. So today I'm going to walk you through 12 of them, and these aren't gimmicks, they are real tactics that change outcomes when you sell your home. So the first one happens the moment an offer comes in, and most sellers have no idea it exists, that it's going on. When an offer lands, the natural instinct is to read it, to react to it, and respond, and most agents do exactly that. But a great listing agent's first move isn't to open the offer, it's to pick up their phone. Every single agent who has shown that property in the last 2 or 3 weeks gets a call. Anybody who's even indicated interest gets a phone call. Not an email, not a text message, a phone call. The message is simple. An offer's come in on this address. If your clients have any interest at all, now is the time to come to the table. And you're not disclosing the offer price or terms or anything. You're creating urgency, and that urgency is real. Another buyer is moving on it. The clock is ticking. The time to move is now. And even if none of those calls go anywhere, you've done your job as a seller's agent. You've also created interest. You've left no door unopened, but often you do get a second offer or a third. And when buyers compete, sellers win. That's not a slogan, that's just how the math works generally. So the second tactic is related, and it protects sellers in a way that people don't realize they need protection. When a buyer submits an offer, it comes in with something called an irrevocable period. So a window of time during which they can't withdraw that offer anymore. And what most sellers don't know is that how long that window of time is matters enormously. A buyer who gives you a 12-hour irrevocable isn't being decisive, they're squeezing you. They want you to make one of the biggest financial decisions of your life under pressure, without time to think, without any time to call any of those other agents who showed the property. So a good listing agent is going to push back on this. They're going to set expectations before any offer comes in, and when an offer arrives with a short irrevocable, they're going to work to extend it to 24 hours, 48 hours, sometimes even longer, because that window is exactly when you make those phone calls to drum up competition and turn one offer into two. Think of it this way. It's like someone sliding a contract across the table and saying, sign this in the next 10 minutes. Most people are going to push back on that. Sellers should too, and a great agent does that pushing for them. Now let's talk about holding offers, because this is one that gets used incorrectly more than almost anything else. And sellers often don't understand the risk that they're taking on when they use this strategy. When you hold offers, you set a specific date and time in the future where all offers must come in at once. Instead of responding to each buyer individually, you're essentially calling an auction. We're reviewing offers on Tuesday at 7, and the goal is to create a competitive environment where multiple buyers are bidding simultaneously. And it can work brilliantly in the right conditions, high demand, well-priced house, active showings in the week leading up to offer night. You can see offers coming in significantly over ask. And this is great for like entry-level homes, really shiny, well-renovated homes in great neighborhoods, properties that don't come up very often, or in tight markets with deep buyer pools. They tend to be the best candidates. But here's what doesn't get said enough. If offer night comes in and only one offer shows up or none, you've just handed all the leverage to the buyer. You've told the market what's going on. Now the property has been on the market. Buyers know offer night is passed. Any offer that comes in afterward is going to come in low because the market just told everyone you didn't have the demand that you were implying. So it's a difficult position to recover from. Higher end properties and more unique homes are particularly vulnerable to this. So buyers in those segments often want to negotiate privately. Hold offers on the wrong property and you might actually chase away your best prospects rather than attracting them. So this is a tool, not a default. It needs to be the right tool for the right property. A discussion with your agent. Here's one that genuinely surprises most sellers, which is days on market. Every day your listing sits without selling. It's sending a signal to buyers, not always a fair signal, but a real one. Everyone knows that the more days on market can equate to a lower selling price at the end of the day. The longer a home is listed, the more buyers start to wonder if there's something wrong with it. Maybe it's priced too high. Maybe there's something that the photos aren't showing. Or maybe other buyers saw something and they walked away. So what's the deal? And none of that might be true, but perception in this market totally drives behavior. So when a listing has been sitting and there's been a meaningful change, maybe a price adjustment, new photos, a staging refresh, a smart agent will sometimes cancel the listing entirely and relist it. And the days on market counter resets to 0. The listing comes back looking fresh, and buyers who may have passed on it the first time will often take a second look when they see a new listing in their search results. And this isn't about deceiving anyone, it's about removing a psychological barrier that was working against a perfectly good home. Now, the change has to be real, but when it is, the reset can be genuinely effective. And what a lot of sellers don't realize is when you relist the property, it gets sent out in all of these agents' auto emailers that go out to clients and all these consumer sites. So it's a new blast out to the market and can put your listing right at the top of the pile. Before a home even hits the market, one of the most valuable things that can happen is a staging consultation. Not the actual staging, but the staging consultation. The timing of this matters more than most people realize. Even if you're 2-3 months out from listing your house, having a stager come in or an interior decorator come in to tell you what to move, where to move it, what clutter needs to go in the closet, if you need a storage bin. These are big things that can take a lot of time, and if you wait until the last minute, it can be too late to make the proper changes to have your home showing in the best light. So having a stager come in for a consult gives us the inventory that we need for the staging, the right couches, the right prints, the right decor, all to create a perfect flow throughout the house and show your house in its absolute best light. One of the most common reasons deals fall apart usually has nothing to do with price. It's inspection surprises. You've already got an accepted offer and you're working through the conditional date, you're almost there, but then something comes up in the inspection and you're back to square one. This does not need to happen, okay? The inspection comes back with issues, sometimes minor, sometimes not, and suddenly the buyer is nervous. They want to renegotiate. Sometimes they walk away entirely. And sellers are often genuinely blindsided by this because they've lived in the home for a long time, for years, and they had no idea that this existed or that it was such a big deal to somebody. The way to get ahead of this is to order a pre-inspection before the home goes to market. This way you can identify any potential issues up front. You decide with your agent which ones are worth fixing before listing and which are better disclosed and priced accordingly. Then when the buyer's inspector comes in and find these things, there's no drama, there's no negotiation. It's already in the disclosure package. It was already factored in. So there's also a trust component here. Buyers who see a pre-inspection report from the seller, they read it as a signal of confidence, a signal of good faith, and it says there's nothing hidden, and that trust tends to make negotiations much smoother and conditional periods shorter and more apt to firm up and close. Open houses are widely misunderstood, and what most sellers have the wrong expectations on what they're actually for. Open houses, they rarely sell homes directly. I think it's 1 in 120 is what the stats are on when buyers actually buy a house from an open house. The buyer who walks in off the street on a Sunday afternoon and makes an offer that week, that's the exception, not the rule. So what open houses actually do when they're run with this in mind is create social proof. When a buyer who's already seen the house, who might be interested but hasn't pulled the trigger, they're still on the fence, when they drive by on a Sunday and they see cars parked up and down the street, people moving in and out, an open house sign on the front door, something shifts. That home suddenly looks like something other people want, more desirable, and that perception of demand is often exactly what gets a hesitant buyer to finally act and bring in an offer. So the open house isn't a sales event, it's a hype mechanism. It's engineered to nudge that buyer who's already interested, the one who needs to feel a little competitive pressure before they'll commit. And that's a very different goal, and it changes how you think about whether or not an open house worked. Here's one that a lot of people notice but rarely understand, okay? Real estate print ads that don't include the address, because it looks like an oversight, but it's not. When there's no address on an ad, the phone has to ring, and when the phone rings, now there's a conversation about the property, about how great the area is, about how great the house is, what the buyer's looking for in their timeline, so we can qualify them, make sure this is the right home for them, they can afford it. That call lets an agent qualify the interest, answer questions in context, and ultimately book a proper showing. It also filters out the drive-by. So someone who sees an address in an ad, they might cruise by the home on their way to work, take a 30-second look from the car and dismiss it, what would otherwise be a great home for them. So often we take somebody who's not 100% interested in the house yet through the front door, and they fall in love and they bring an offer. So it's very important that we're able to have a conversation with clients about the house so we can get them through if it's of interest and see if they're actually interested in it or not, rather than just driving by. After every showing, every single one, a great listing agent is following up with the showing agent for feedback. Not an automated form, because everybody does that, with a phone call. What did your clients think? Was it the price, the layout, the finishes? Was there something specific that gave them pause? And this isn't just good manners, it's data. And the data should be directly informing what happens next on the listing. If 3 different agents independently mention the same concern about, let's say, the kitchen, that's a pattern. That's something we need to address. Maybe it's something that can be addressed before the next showing. Maybe it's a pricing conversation. Maybe it's how the space is being described in the listing itself. The feedback loop between showings and listing adjustments is one of the clearest things that separates a listing that sells from one that sits. Sitting doesn't tell you anything. Feedback tells you everything. Here's a tactic that gets overlooked almost entirely: advertising the home before it hits MLS, and continuing, of course, well beyond it. So coming soon campaigns, social media teasers a week or 2 before listing goes live, knocking on the neighbors' doors before the listing hits the market, targeted digital ads, reaching people who have been actively searching in that neighborhood, email blast to buyer agents that you know in the area, to the listing agent's brokerage so that they know about the listing before it goes live. The goal of all of this isn't necessarily to find the buyer directly, it's to create familiarity, to create a sense that this is a home that people are already talking about. So when a buyer finally does come across the listing through their own search, through their agent, wherever, they've already seen it in 3 different places over the past 2 weeks, and they arrive at that showing differently. The property already feels like something. It feels desirable, and it feels like people want it. In a market driven heavily by emotion, that pre-built awareness is no small thing. It's a difference between a buyer who shows up cold and a buyer who shows up ready to move. And the last one surprises people, because negotiation in real estate is usually thought of as a one-directional thing. Buyer comes in, buyer makes an offer, seller counters or accepts it or declines it. But sellers don't realize that they can send a seller offer to a buyer. So maybe a buyer has come through once and then they went through again, and the buyer's agent is asking all the right questions about closing date, terms, etc. The sellers can draft an offer to that buyer to get this ball moving, to get the negotiations started. And we very rarely see this, but when we do it, it often works. We just draft up an offer the same way you would with the buyer and submit it to the buyer's agent. And what most sellers don't understand is once you send that offer to a buyer's agent, that buyer's agent now has an obligation to put that piece of paper in front of the buyer so you can get an answer and get things off the ground and get your house sold. So these are 12 things that separate a well-run listing from one that's just sitting on MLS hoping for the right buyer to show up. And none of this is magic. It's preparation, process, and just knowing when to use which tool. But if you're planning to sell, or you're already listed and things just aren't moving the way that you want them to, it's worth asking whether or not these pieces are in place, whether or not these things are getting done on your behalf. If you've made it this far, thanks for watching. If you think this was useful and you'd like to see more, hit the subscribe button.